There is a psychological phenomenon that researchers have studied for decades, and almost nobody talks about it in the context of love. It is called the arrival fallacy. And it works like this. We spend our entire lives believing that when we reach a certain point, when we lose the weight, get the promotion, raise the children, survive the divorce, we will finally arrive at the version of ourselves that is ready. Ready for happiness, ready for peace, ready for love. And then we arrive, and we look around, and instead of feeling ready, we feel something stranger, something quieter, something that the world never prepared us for. We feel free. Not the reckless freedom of youth, where freedom means the absence of responsibility, but the earned freedom of a woman who has spent 50 years becoming, and who finally knows who she became. Psychologists call the years after 50 one of the most significant developmental windows in a woman's life. Not a decline, not a closing, a window. They have found, in study after study, that women in their 50s report higher levels of self-knowledge, emotional clarity, and authentic confidence than at any previous point in their lives. The masks come off. The performances end. The exhausting work of trying to be what everyone else needed you to be begins, for the first time, to lift. And it is precisely in that lifting, in that exhale, in that arrival, that something unexpected becomes possible. Love. Real love. Perhaps for the very first time. Now I know what some of you are thinking, because I know the voice in your head. It is the same voice that has been narrating the story of your romantic life for years now, and it sounds something like this. You are too late, too complicated, too much history, too much baggage, too many edges that don't soften the way they once did. The world is designed for young love, for smooth, unscathed, uncomplicated love. And you, with your full and layered and beautifully difficult life, are somehow disqualified from it. That voice is wrong, and the science agrees with me. Here is what the research actually shows about women and love after 50. Studies in adult developmental psychology, including landmark work from Harvard and the University of California, consistently find that emotional intelligence, the single greatest predictor of relationship success, peaks in midlife and beyond. Not in our 20s, not in our 30s. Later, when we have lived enough to know the difference between what we want and what we need, between who we love and who we are afraid to leave, between a relationship that fills us and a relationship that quietly drains us until there is nothing left to give. The capacity for the deepest love of your life does not arrive with youth. It arrives with wisdom. And wisdom, by definition, requires time. But here is the part that almost no one tells women over 50. And I want you to hear this, really hear it, because it is going to change how you see yourself starting right now. The very things you have been taught to see as liabilities in love. Your history, your grief, your complexity, your clear-eyed refusal to accept less than you deserve. Those are not the reasons love is harder to find after 50. Those are the reasons that when you find it, it will be unlike anything you have ever experienced. Unlike anything you were even capable of experiencing before. There is a woman sitting in a coffee shop right now. She is 53 years old. She has raised 2 children, buried a marriage, survived a career transition, and rebuilt herself from the inside out, twice. She is not desperate. She is not broken. She is not settling. She is sitting with a cup of coffee and a quiet smile on her face, because last Tuesday she had the kind of conversation with someone that she has never had in her entire life. Not at 22. Not at 35. Not ever. And she is thinking, why did nobody tell me it could feel like this? Nobody told her. And nobody told you either. Because somewhere along the way, the world decided that love has an expiration date. That romance belongs to the young, the smooth-skinned, the unscathed. That if you are over 50 and still looking for love, you are somehow behind, late, running out of time, or worse, that you should just be grateful for companionship and stop expecting more than that. I am here to tell you that is one of the most dangerous lies ever told about human beings, because what I know, and what the science knows, and what thousands of women who found love after 50 will tell you with tears in their eyes, is that the love you find at this stage of life is not a consolation prize. It is not the leftovers of love. It is not love light, or love with limitations, or love that requires an asterisk. It is the most powerful love of your life, and there are very specific reasons why. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you are going to understand something about yourself that most people never get to understand. You are going to see that what feels like a late start is actually the beginning of something that younger versions of you were simply not equipped to handle. Let's go back to the beginning. Not your beginning. The beginning of what you believed about love. Most of us learned about love from broken sources. We learned from movies where love was fast, fiery, and frictionless. We learned from parents who stayed together out of obligation or who split apart in fury. We learned from first heartbreaks that taught us love was unsafe, and we responded by either chasing it recklessly or building walls around it. We learned from a culture that told us love was something you found in your 20s, locked down by your 30s, and maintained quietly for the rest of your life. And so we did. Many of us did exactly that. We found someone. We committed. We built lives. We were responsible. And somewhere inside that responsible life, a quiet question lived. Is this it? Is this really what I thought love was supposed to be? And we silenced that question because we were supposed to be grateful, and grateful people don't ask for more. Then the 50s arrived, and for many women, everything changed. A marriage ended. A spouse passed. Children grew up and left. A career that had defined your identity for decades suddenly felt hollow. And in the rubble of that rearranging, in the ashes of what you thought your life was going to look like, something unexpected happened. You started becoming yourself. Not the version of you that was shaped by other people's expectations. Not the version of you that was molded by the roles you had to play. Mother, wife, caretaker, peacekeeper, achiever. But the real version. The version that has preferences. The version that knows what it can tolerate and what it refuses to accept. The version that has looked failure in the face enough times to stop being afraid of it. The version that has grieved deeply enough to know what actually matters. And here is the extraordinary thing about that version of you. It is the version that is finally capable of real love. Not the love of projection, where you fall in love with who you hope someone will become. Not the love of desperation, where you stay because you are terrified of being alone. Not the love of transaction, where you keep score and measure worth. Not the love of performance, where you show each other your best faces and hide everything else. Real love. The kind built on actual knowing. Think about what you bring to a relationship now that you could not have brought at 25. Think about it seriously, because most people gloss over this like it is a minor footnote. It is not a footnote. It is the entire story. At 25, you did not know yourself. I am not saying that to be harsh. Nobody fully knows themselves at 25. The prefrontal cortex is still developing. The emotional regulation systems are still being wired. You were still reacting to the world rather than responding to it. You were still confusing intensity for intimacy, still mistaking chemistry for compatibility, still staying in relationships because you were afraid that if you left, nobody else would ever love you. Psychologists have a name for this pattern. They call it anxious attachment. And research shows it is most pronounced in young adulthood, when our sense of self is still fragile enough to be shattered by romantic rejection. When your identity is not yet stable, every relationship carries existential stakes. Every breakup is not just a loss. It is a dissolution. You don't just lose the person. You lose the version of yourself that existed inside that relationship. And that kind of love, love where your very self is on the line, is not free love. It is desperate love. And desperate love makes terrible decisions. At 50 plus, you know things. You know that red flags do not become green flags with enough love and patience. You know that someone who makes you feel small in private will eventually make you feel small in public. You know that the butterflies of early attraction are not the same as the deep, settled warmth of someone who shows up for you consistently. You know the difference between a relationship that excites you and a relationship that grows you. You know what you are willing to give, and you know what you need to receive, and you are not ashamed of either of those things anymore. That knowledge is the foundation that love after 50 is built on. And a foundation like that produces something that no amount of youth can replicate. Let me tell you about something that researchers call emotional maturity, and why it changes everything about how love actually works. When we are young, our nervous systems are primed for drama. We are biologically wired to seek novelty, to chase highs, to interpret anxiety as excitement. This is why young love feels electric, because it is activating the same reward centers in the brain as risk. The uncertainty is part of the attraction. The push and pull is part of the chemistry. But here is what that also means. It means that much of early love is actually anxiety. The racing heart when they don't text back. The spiral when you can't tell where you stand. The obsessive thinking, the overanalyzing, the constant calibration of how they feel about you. We called that love. We thought that if it didn't feel like that, it wasn't real. We were wrong. What we were feeling was attachment anxiety dressed up as romance. And because that is all we knew, we kept choosing partners who activated that anxiety because calm felt boring. Security felt like settling. Ease felt like it meant there was no spark. There is a psychological concept called the window of tolerance, the emotional space in which we can function, feel, and connect without becoming overwhelmed or shutting down. Trauma, loss, and chronic stress narrow that window. But healing, therapy, self-reflection, and the slow accumulation of life experience widen it. And women over 50, who have done the work of surviving and rebuilding, typically have the widest windows of their lives. What that means in the context of love is profound. It means you can hold more. You can sit with discomfort without running. You can feel fear without letting it make every decision. You can be vulnerable without being destroyed by it. You can love without losing yourself, because yourself is no longer something that depends on the relationship to exist. After 50, your nervous system has changed. You have been through enough to know that the peace is the point, that the person who makes your life quieter, not noisier, is the person worth keeping. That love should not feel like a crisis you are managing. That real intimacy feels less like a roller coaster and more like coming home. And when you find another person who has reached that same place, who has also done enough living and grieving and growing to want peace over drama, something extraordinary happens. Two emotionally mature people falling in love is not a slow, boring, safe experience. It is the most profound experience available to human beings, because it is love without the games. Love without the masks. Love with the full and complete truth of who you both are laid on the table and the choice. The conscious, deliberate, fully sighted choice to love that person anyway. That is not less than young love. That is exponentially more. Now I want to talk about something that almost nobody talks about when they discuss love after 50, and that is the gift of loss. I know that sounds strange. Stay with me. Every woman over 50 has lost something. Some of you have lost marriages. Some of you have lost people you loved with your whole heart. Some of you have lost versions of yourselves you thought were permanent. Some of you have lost the future you planned, the timeline you expected, the life you were sure you were going to have. And grief, real grief, is one of the most transformative forces in human psychology. There is research from the field of post-traumatic growth, a concept developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, which found something that initially seems impossible. That people who have experienced significant loss and come through it often report not just recovering but growing beyond where they were before the loss. They develop deeper relationships, greater appreciation for life, a stronger sense of personal strength, more compassion, and a richer, more expansive spiritual and philosophical understanding of what it means to be human. They don't just survive the loss, they become more because of it. When you grieve deeply, something in you breaks open. The protective shell you built around your most tender places gets cracked by pain in a way that nothing else can crack it. And in that cracking, in that terrible, unwanted opening, a new kind of capacity grows. The capacity for depth, for radical honesty, for presence, for the kind of vulnerability that is not weakness but is actually the highest form of courage. Women who have not yet grieved deeply tend to love with one eye open and one foot out the door, always protecting themselves from the loss they haven't had yet. Women who have grieved and come through it know that loss is survivable. They know it hurts in ways words cannot describe, and they know they can survive it. And because they know that, they love differently. They love all the way in. They don't hold back the best parts of themselves for a day that might never come. They give fully, completely, because they have learned that the giving is the point. If you have loved and lost, whether through death, divorce, betrayal, or the slow drift of two people who grew apart, you carry a capacity for love that you could not have developed any other way. That loss, that grief, that painful opening, it is not baggage. It is the credential that qualifies you for the kind of love that most people never reach. Let's talk about identity, because this is one of the most underestimated aspects of love after 50. When you were younger and looking for love, you were often looking for someone to help you figure out who you were. That is not a flaw. It is developmentally normal. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, a stage where our sense of self is still fluid, still being shaped by the people and experiences around us. We construct our identities in relationship to other people, especially in our younger years. We try on versions of ourselves in our romantic partnerships. We shape and reshape who we are based on who we are with. The problem is that when two people who are still constructing their identities fall in love, they often lose themselves in each other, or they try to change each other, or they build an identity so enmeshed with the relationship that when it ends, they don't know who they are outside of it. After 50, most women have crossed into what psychologist Erik Erikson called the stage of generativity, a stage defined not by searching for identity, but by expressing it, by contributing it, by knowing it well enough to give it freely without fear of losing it. You are no longer trying to figure out who you are. You are living as who you are. And when you bring that self, that secure, anchored, fully formed self, into a relationship, something different happens. Instead of losing yourself in another person, you add yourself to them. Instead of trying to complete each other, you complement each other. Instead of needing each other in the desperate, consuming way of insecure young love, you choose each other. Every single day, with full clarity. That choosing, that free, conscious, open-eyed choosing, is the most beautiful thing that exists between two human beings. And it is almost impossible to do fully until you know yourself well enough to know what you are choosing and why. I want to speak for a moment to the women in this audience who are afraid, because I know some of you are. You have been hurt before, and the hurt was real, and the idea of opening yourself up again, of becoming soft again, of letting someone in again, feels terrifying. You have built a life that is manageable, that is predictable, that is yours. And you are wondering whether love is worth the risk of disrupting all of that. I hear you. And I am not going to tell you that love after 50 comes without risk. It does. Every love comes with risk, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. What I will tell you is this. The risk calculus changes after 50. When you were young, you risked love from a place of incompleteness, which meant the stakes were existential. If it didn't work, you didn't just lose the relationship. You lost the version of yourself that was built around that relationship. That is a terrifying risk because the collapse is total. After 50, you risk love from a place of wholeness. If it doesn't work, and sometimes it won't, you are still yourself. Your foundation is intact. Your identity is not erased. You grieve, yes. You hurt, yes. But you do not disappear. And knowing you will not disappear makes you capable of a bravery in love that younger you could not have accessed. Psychologists call this secure attachment, the ability to connect deeply and love fully while maintaining your own stable sense of self. Secure attachment in youth is largely determined by your childhood experiences, which means most of us had little control over it. But research shows that earned security, the kind you build through self-awareness, healing, and lived experience, is absolutely possible in adulthood, and women over 50 are the most likely of any demographic to have earned it. The risk is still real, but you are more than equipped to carry it. You have survived before. You will survive again. And the possible reward, the possible life of deep, knowing, chosen, mature love, is worth the risk of a survivable pain. Don't let fear make the decision for you. Fear is loud after loss, but it is also a liar. Now, I want to address something practical, because I know some of you are sitting here with the emotional reality of what I'm saying resonating deeply, and also with very concrete concerns. What about the logistics of love after 50? The blended families, the grown children who have opinions, the finances that are more complicated, the bodies that have changed, the health realities, the histories that are long and complex? These are real. I am not going to minimize them. But here is what I know about women who are over 50 and navigating love with emotional intelligence. They handle these things better than younger couples do. Not because the logistics are simpler. They are not. But because the people are more equipped. You have had practice having hard conversations. You have negotiated, compromised, communicated, failed to communicate, and lived with the consequences. You know that love is not a feeling that carries you effortlessly through hard times. It is a set of skills that you practice consistently, even when you are tired or scared or frustrated. You have those skills in ways you simply did not when you were 30. And the physical reality of an aging body, the changed shape, the changed energy, the visible evidence of all the years you have lived. That is not the obstacle it might feel like. Because after 50, both of you have lived in a body long enough to know that a body is not who you are. The people who fall in love after 50 are not in love with youth. They are in love with the person, the character, the laugh, the way someone listens, the way they handle things when things get hard, the way they make you feel like yourself when you are with them. That kind of love, the love that sees past the surface to the actual person, is the deepest love there is, and it becomes fully available only when both people have lived enough to stop being distracted by the surface. There is something else I need to tell you about love after 50, and it is perhaps the most counterintuitive thing of all. You are more attractive now than you have ever been. I don't mean this as a hollow compliment. I mean it as a psychological and social reality that is backed by how attraction actually works in mature adults. When we are young, attraction is heavily driven by novelty, physical signaling, and the unconscious search for someone who will stabilize our still-forming identity. We are attracted, often, to people who make us feel chosen, because being chosen feels like proof of our worth. That is not a foundation. That is a transaction. After 50, the psychology of attraction shifts fundamentally. What becomes magnetic is not youth or physical perfection, but presence, groundedness, the quality of someone who knows who they are and is completely unbothered by the need to perform it. Humor that is genuinely earned. Kindness that doesn't need an audience. The ability to hold space for another person without immediately making everything about yourself. You have developed all of those things through your losses, your rebuilds, your long, quiet seasons of becoming. You are not less attractive now than you were at 30. You are attractive in a way that 30-year-old you could not have been, because the things that make you attractive now are things that only time can build. The people who are also over 50 and looking for love. The good ones, the ones worth finding. They are not looking for perfection. They are not looking for someone who hasn't made mistakes. They are not looking for someone whose life has been smooth and uninterrupted. They are looking for someone real, someone layered, someone who has been through things and came out with their hearts still open. Someone exactly like you. You are not too late. You are not past your prime. You are not settling for second best. You are arriving, finally, completely, fully, as the version of yourself capable of the love that was always meant for you. Let me paint a picture for you of what love after 50 actually looks like for the women who find it. It looks like two people sitting in comfortable silence who don't need to fill the quiet with noise because the quiet feels good. It looks like someone who knows your history and loves you not despite it, but because of the person that history made you. It looks like being seen, genuinely, completely seen, by another person who has also been through enough to know that the real stuff is always underneath the surface. It looks like laughter that is easy and honest. It looks like someone who holds your hand, not because they have to, but because they want to, every single time. It looks like the kind of intimacy that younger love promises but rarely delivers, because younger love does not yet have the vocabulary for that kind of depth. It looks like the kind of partnership where you each show up as full people, not halves searching for completion. It looks like two people building something together, not because they are afraid to be alone, but because being together is genuinely, undeniably better. That is what is waiting on the other side of the risk. That is what is possible for you right now. Not someday. Not in theory. Right now. In the life you are living. With the self you have become. I want to leave you with something that I think about often when I consider love and time and what we truly deserve. There is a Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The cracks are not hidden. They are not minimized or painted over. They are filled with gold and put on display, because the philosophy behind kintsugi holds that what has been broken and repaired is more beautiful than what was never broken at all. The breakage is not the end of the object's value. It is the beginning of its most interesting chapter. You are that pottery. Every crack in you, every loss, every failure, every heartbreak, every year that carved new lines into you, is not damage to hide or apologize for. It is the gold. It is the evidence of a life lived with enough depth and enough love to be worth grieving when it changed. It is what makes you interesting, what makes you real, what makes you capable of the fullness of love in a way that smooth, uncracked, untested things simply are not. Psychologists who study resilience talk about a concept called post-traumatic growth. And one of the most consistent findings in that research is that the people who grow the most from hardship are not the people who suffered the least. They are the people who, after suffering, chose to remain open, chose to stay curious about life, chose to believe, against all rational evidence sometimes, that something good was still possible. That is you. If you are here. If you watched this far. If something in this video cracked something open in you or confirmed something you have quietly known but been afraid to say out loud, that is you. You are still open, still curious, still willing to believe. And that willingness, that is not naivety. That is not desperation. That is the single greatest act of courage available to a human being who has already been through the fire. So here is what I want you to do. Not tomorrow. Not when things settle down. Now. I want you to stop waiting for permission to want love at this stage of your life. Stop treating the love you deserve as something you have to justify or apologize for or earn through enough suffering. Stop listening to the voices, internal and external, that suggest the window has closed and you should make peace with less. Make peace, yes, but make peace from a place of fullness, not resignation. Make peace with who you are and then go out into the world as that person, fully, unapologetically, completely, and let love find you there. Because it will. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not easily, but it will. Because what you have now, the depth, the clarity, the self-knowledge, the hard-earned emotional intelligence, the wide-open and tested and gold-filled heart, that is exactly what real love requires. And you have it. You have always had it. You just needed enough life to bring it fully forward. If this video moved something in you, if it reached something that needed to be reached, I want you to do one thing before you close this. Share it with one woman in your life who needs to hear it. Because somewhere in your world there is a woman sitting alone in a quiet house, or staring at a blank message she hasn't sent, or talking herself out of love before she even tries, who needs someone to tell her what you now know. Tell her. Share this. And if you are ready to keep going deeper into this conversation, about love, about identity, about building the most powerful chapter of your life after 50, then subscribe, because this is exactly the conversation we are going to keep having here every single week.